You are now listening to Lower Road Radio.
Hey, welcome one and all to the #1 podcast, winter, spring, and fall. Talking sports for the thrill of it all. Hey, talking life, but we're killing it all. Jason and Dan with the master plan. These are dangerous men with the mic in the hand. Ha! Bonafide winners everywhere that we go. You're a part of the team.
Lower Road Radio.
Dad light, thug light, bright lights in sight. All right. Dad light, thug light, bright lights in sight. All right. Yeah. Dad light, thug light, bright lights in sight. All right. Bonafide winners everywhere that we go. You're a part of the team.
Lower Road Radio.
Let's get it.
At Tanagra, when the walls fell, this is Dan. He's coming at you another time for a truncated Lower Road Radio with my co-host, as always, Jason. How you doing today?
I don't know what truncated means.
It's shorter than normal.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what are we talking about?
Well, here's what we're talking about. We got a question.
Yes.
I think, some
Facebook.
response from Facebook or something like that. And somebody had some nuts and bolts questions about podcasting, basically.
Yes. Well, they were starting up their own podcast, and they said, I don't know what I'm doing. How do I do this? And
I read a study the other day, and there are 17 people left in America that don't have a podcast.
Okay.
So,
after this, it'll be 16.
Right. Uh-huh. Yeah. Uh-huh. So we thought, since there's so many people that have or are trying to do their own podcast,
right.
I've not listened to all of them. I listened to a few podcasts.
A few of the 300 million.
I listened to Conan O'Brien's podcast.
Uh-huh.
I listened to a couple of church podcasts.
Bill Simmons?
I listened to Bill Simmons. It depends on who he has on.
As a guest.
Yeah. Or what the subject is. I might listen to him.
Do you listen to Lower Road Radio?
Yeah. I always listen to Lower Road Radio because I want to get better, Jason.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
See, I listen to it as we do it live.
And I know. And every once in a while, I'll listen to Tony Kornheiser.
Yeah.
He's on every day. You know,
I like Tony.
He's great, but it just feels it's
a lot.
I can't. My life doesn't lend itself to listening to that much audio.
Yeah.
So I listen to some podcasts, and they all sound great. But I got a really good feeling that they are some crappy sounding podcasts out there, and people are having a hard time figuring this whole thing out.
Yes,
we have made our fair share of mistakes.
Many.
Yeah, we've learned our lessons, and we're not. Professional engineers.
No.
But I would say we know more than most.
Yes. We've been around equipment, sound equipment, microphones, computers.
So let's say you're listening to this and you're like, I want to have my own podcast. I want to have a podcast with my grandpa where we talk about fishing. Jason, what is it going to cost, first of all?
That's a good question.
Because that's what's the upfront cost and then what's the perpetuating cost?
Right. So the easiest thing to do is to have a service, provide a podcast service.
Which we use.
Podcast network. We use Podbean.
And we love Podbean.
Podbean is great.
They've been great. Pretty affordable.
Yeah, was it like $9 a month?
It's $10 a month,
yeah.
Or you can pay for a year at a time and save
a discounted
$20
rate,
or something like that. So, yeah, you're
it's
talking
basically unlimited audio.
We would not record as much as they let us record.
That's
you know
right.
What I mean?
They actually called us one time and said, "Please stop recording."
Yeah, right. Yeah. No. So we love Podbean.
Yeah.
They're pretty user friendly.
What are other ones? Stitcher.
Stitcher, Podbean. There's a million of them now. I mean, there's one called Buzzsprout. There's lots of different ones.
Well, and see, this is a common misconception, I guess, if you're not familiar with it. Like iTunes is not a host,
right?
It's not a provider.
You don't just call up iTunes and say, I've got a podcast, and then they put it on for you. You have to have a provider. So we suggest Podbean.
Yeah, Podbean's great.
They do a great job.
And then you link it to an iTunes.
And then Podbean steps you through that process.
That's right.
You're not all out there on your own. So you get yourself signed up on Podbean, do the premium or whatever it is that you're paying, because the minimum amount you're only going to get a very small amount of audio and not a lot of the bells and whistles.
I will say this: this is not a Podbean advertisement.
Might as well be.
We're not paid to do this. Podbean's not paying us.
They're welcome to.
I will say this though: anytime I've ever reached out to them on anything, they've been back to me instantly.
Sure.
I mean, within a very short period of time. Technical issues, customer service type of things. Hey, questions. What about this? What about that? Very, very good customer service.
So there's your monthly cost. Now your upfront cost
Equipment. Yeah.
So there's a couple of ways that you could do it. You could get your standard microphones with your XLR cord.
Well, I guess before we even go to down that road, this podcast might be way longer than what a truncated podcast
It'll
would
be truncated.
Okay. Here's the thing. Before you even start to buy equipment, you need to know how many people are going to be in this podcast.
This is an important thing.
This is really important.
Is this just you and your grandpa, or are your uncles going to come on sometimes?
That's right.
Is this a group of 5 people talking at once?
It could be one person.
Is it just one? If it is, your life is going to be a lot easier.
One person
is
really
just
easy.
It's so easy. If it's just you on microphone, then let's start with that and then move up.
Yeah,
you want to do that?
Yes.
So here would be my suggestion, Jason. You tell me if you differ. I would get a Yeti Blue microphone.
Yes.
And it plugs into your computer.
USB?
It's got the USB, plugs in the back of your computer. I would then download Audacity.
It's a free program.
Which is a free program. It's what we're recording on now. It's got, you can fade it in, fade it out. You could even, mess with some gates and some
EQ
different effects and EQ it. And if you can get a little bit more crazy if you want to. And then you can layer music on top of it and all that sort of stuff. And so that you get Audacity, you plug your microphone in. Audacity should recognize that you have a microphone.
Fingers crossed.
There's a little microphone icon up there.
Drop down,
you click on the drop-down menu. You say, it's the Blue Yeti. That's what I want. You press record. You see your levels going up and down. You want to be in the green.
Yeah, well, before you even do that, we've made a huge mistake multiple times.
Yes.
A lot of computers, including the iMac that we're recording on, has an internal microphone.
Right.
If you don't hit that drop-down menu, you might be recording on the internal microphone, which is a disaster.
And so you'll see your levels hopping up and down. You're thinking, okay, I'm recording. Make sure that it knows that you're recording not from your built-in internal microphone, but the microphone that you're plugged into. So you want it to say that. I've heard that you should change the project rate to 4,800
or 4,410.
It's 44. It comes as 4,400, 44,100, 40. But they say you should change it to 48. I don't know. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I haven't recognized the difference. So that being said, you do that. You plug it in. You record. You stop it
as an MP3.
Then here's the big deal.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. Audacity, you're going to have to get a secondary option because Audacity can export as an MP3, but you need like a little pack, like a little add-on,
a little patch. Yeah.
So you can find that patch online, and YouTube, all of this stuff. So then you export it as an MP3. Now there are a couple of different files that Podbean supports.
Will accept,
We always do MP3 because I don't know why, but that just seems the easiest. So export it as an MP3. You go to Podbean, you say publish a podcast. It leads you through download or upload.
It's step by step.
Write a description, insert a picture, boom, it's up there. And then if you've done all of that, iTunes and
Recently,
Spotify
and YouTube,
all that stuff,
all this stuff.
Yeah, Podbean, which is wonderful, sends it out to iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and YouTube, and it does all that for you. All you have to do is load it in that one place on Podbean, and they will send it out. They do all the hard work for you. Yeah. And then that's just you. Now, if you have 2 people, you could still use one microphone. That Yeti microphone is an omnidirectional. It's got an omnidirectional option.
That's right.
So you could set it on a table. It's a pretty heavy thing. You could set it on a table in between you and the other person, and you could change it to omnidirection to bidirectional.
Yes.
There's like surround sound, and then there's bidirectional, and it's picking up sound from both sides. And then as long as you're both
relatively close
in the same distance from it, it should pick it up, and it should do just fine. It's not going to sound as good as hopefully, we sound now because we're right on top of our own microphones.
Yes.
But that's an option, and it's not the worst sounding thing. If you have a room that's good.
I would say this. It's a great option to start with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you are just curious and just want to try it, I would try that first.
Yeah. And you could even set it omnidirection and have 5 people sitting around it.
We've done that.
Yeah.
It sounds okay.
It's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
And what is that Yeti Blue microphone? It's like $120?
Oh, yeah. I think it's even come down in price.
Yeah.
$100.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So that's not a huge expense.
No.
So you could, by yourself or with another person, start podcasting for $10 a month plus $100 up front, assuming
and a computer.
Assuming you already have a computer, some sort of laptop. You get Audacity for free, pay Podbean $10 a month, get your microphone, you're off and running.
Yeah.
That's pretty simple.
It is.
Now, if you want to get a little bit more complicated, there's a few other things that you could do. Now,
Well, it elevates the podcast.
right.
So right now we're on 2 different microphones.
Yes.
We made a huge mistake when we first started, and we
Yes.
bought identical microphones.
Yes. So talk about that.
This is something that I don't quite understand, but Yeti, and I think a lot of USB microphones have this common problem. If you buy 2 identical microphones, plug them both in,
To the same
your computer doesn't know that it's 2 separate microphones.
They have the same digital footprint.
Yeah, same digital fingerprint
or whatever it's called. And so your computer thinks that it's the same microphone.
Right, and it will use one and not the other one.
And so what we did was we sent ours back to Yeti.
Yes.
And then they changed
Reprogrammed
the
it.
programming on it so that it would recognize it as 2 different microphones.
We
You
did that-
can do that.
Yeah, we did that for a long time until you broke one of the Yeti
I
guys.
broke one of them. But in my defense, I don't know which one I broke.
You broke mine.
Well, I don't know, but they were
No,
both
I know.
exactly the same.
They weren't.
So,
Mine was brand new, never scratched.
and I gave you the one that worked. Okay. But I think what we've landed on is better anyway. So what
It
we're
is.
doing now is, first of all, the equipment that we're using is a little bit overboard. We have a Allen and Heath
14-channel.
mixer.
Yeah.
And so we're sending that out, USB out to the computer, and you and I each have our own channel.
Yes.
Now, the problem with sending it like this is Audacity does not recognize it as 2 different feeds. It just has one feed going in.
Yes.
So then what we've done is on our mixer, we've pushed you all the way to the left, and we've pushed me all the way to the right. And so I'm completely in the right channel, you're completely in the left channel. When the recording is done, Audacity's got this option to split to mono, and then it splits those 2 tracks, and then I can level them out so one of us is not louder than the other.
Right. And that is usually a good thing because I'm always louder than you.
Yeah. Right now, like, just to look at the sound waves, my sound waves are a little bit more than yours. You know,
But I
which,
guarantee you I'm louder.
yeah. So what we can do is then we can change that in post.
Yes.
So, and another little suggestion too is anchor yourself, right? What you don't want is to do the Dave Caminetti thing, which is where, and Dave, I love you, but you totally messed up the podcast.
Yeah.
Dave was all over the place.
He was.
He must have had like 5 Red Bulls or something before. I don't know what the deal
He
was.
was bouncing
He was
around.
all over the place.
Yeah.
And so his he would talk like this for a while, and he would kind of lean back and talk, and then he would turn over and talk to you over there, and then he'd turn over and talk to me, and then he'd be right on top of the mic for a minute. You know what I mean? So it was just like, Dave, focus.
Yeah.
We use pop filters to try to get rid of some of that, windscreens.
Yeah.
And so definitely I try to find a position to be in for the whole podcast. Like I have my elbows on the table, I'm leaning forward in a specific way, and I'm going to try to stay. This is like an anchor point for me.
Yes.
So
For me, it's the pop filter.
Yeah.
Which is attached to the microphone, and it loops back around. It's like this round piece with a screen over it, and I just let my nose just touch the tip of it just a little bit.
Yeah, you also do the entire thing. I've noticed whenever you do the Mariah Carey thing, where you
I
put
hold
your hand to your
finger
ear,
in my ear.
and you keep on doing this other thing with your other hand, where you're like going up and down, like
Yeah.
you're singing, but you're not singing. It's
No.
weird. But hey, that works for you.
Hey, whatever works for
right?
you.
We're not gonna. It's an audio medium. Nobody can see what you're doing.
That's right. Now, if you're getting into the realm of having 4 or 5 different people on the podcast,
What are you gonna get? What's the optimum? And so our setup right now that we're using 2 fairly nice microphones with XLR cables, boom microphone stands, and a soundboard. Now, this whole setup probably cost, if I had to guess, I'd say $20, $100, $50. I don't know. Do you know what that soundboard cost?
You probably get one. You could get a soundboard used for, $100, $150.
You want to make sure it has a USB out option.
Well, you could run an audio out if you had an audio input on your computer.
Right. Yeah. Most computers don't have that. Some of them do.
Desktops, all desktops do.
So, our whole thing is, our whole setup is $300, $400, something like that.
Yes.
For everything that we're using here.
Now, so for $400, you can also buy, it's called a Zoom H6.
And that's a pretty cool little thing.
It's a very, very cool thing. It's just a handheld device, battery operated. It holds an SD card that you can record, 100 hours worth of audio on. And it can take 6 different inputs, 4 different XLRs, and then 2 different channels for music and whatever else.
Takes them all as their own channel,
That's
which
right.
is great.
Now, you're going to have a lot of post-production work.
It's going to be more post-production work. Yeah, that's
right.
true. Mm-hmm.
But if you want to level everything out and have a professional sounding podcast, that'd be a great way to go. And it's mobile.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about, we did one outdoor podcast.
Yeah,
with
the
a
Campfire
laptop and
special.
some
It's one of our most listened to episodes, actually.
I like it. It was good.
Uh-huh.
But having a device like that would make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
You don't have to have
be
your
so
equipment
easy.
outside.
And it even has a little microphone to pick up like background noise if you want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, which is, in the campfire, the crackle of the fire maybe is not a bad thing,
So it's honestly, it's as little or as much as you want.
Yeah.
But if you want to if you're just like, what are the baseline costs? $10 a month for Podbean, and then $100 microphone. You're
Truth, yeah, $100 microphone is as much as you really need to spend.
That's right.
I mean, if you want to go crazy, you could buy a microphone, like a studio microphone for $1,000, and just go crazy. But
it'd be an overload.
It would be. It's completely not necessary. Like
Yeah.
I said, I listen to Conan O'Brien's podcast. It's obviously well produced. It's got a lot of post production stuff like that. I listen to our podcast. The difference in sound quality is like if he's 100, we're like 90.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really almost not even discernible.
Yeah.
You'd never really know. You don't need to spend $1,000 on this whole setup.
No.
You can start recording for $10 a month plus anywhere from $100 to $400 if you really want to get crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe and as you add microphones and XLR cables, stuff like that.
So those are all the technical things.
Yeah.
So there's some behind the scenes things that we've done along the way that we didn't have when we first started.
Yeah.
So when we first started, we didn't have a snappy theme song,
Yes.
right? And so if you've stumbled across our podcast recently, you might listen to the first 30 seconds. Thought, this is amazing.
Yeah.
These guys are awesome. Well, that's all Dave Caminetti.
Davey C.
And he has reasonable rates.
I don't know. I don't think we should advertise for him.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he's
not
offering
doing that
to
out.
do that.
It's like
Listen,
$1,000.
I'll do a
$1,000 one time.
I'll do a song for you if you
For
want me to.
$1,000.
For $1,000. Yeah, Levi, my son, and I will record some stuff. It'll actually be pretty good because my son's actually really talented.
You're just going to outsource it to him.
I'm the ideas man.
Yeah.
So he'll get 10%. Yeah. So theme music. Now, okay. Here's the other thing with podcasting. They say, I don't know, podcasting is like the Wild West. Like you and I, we could probably play like a whole Ed Sheeran song and no one would ever like know the difference, in the middle of the thing, something copyrighted, stuff like that. We don't do that.
We have chosen
Right.
to take the high road.
Although it looks like we could get away with it. Sorry, man, my back hurts. It looks like we could get away with it. And we used to go out of every episode with an 8-bit song, and we would find like an 8-bit version of like, Just Beat It or something like that. And that was always a fun way to end it. But we had decided, let's not do anything copyrighted, So all of the music we play is actually recorded by Davey C. The outro music as well as the intro song.
Yeah.
So we would advise to do that. Now, what you could do is go online and research royalty-free music.
That's right.
And you could find some really good stuff for intro and outro music. Now, the intro won't have words that have anything to do with you or anything like that. But if you just search royalty-free music, there are tons of options.
Yes.
Of different like styles and all sorts of stuff that you can choose. That's what I would do. I would just go to royaltyfreemusic.com or just, Google it, find some different things that kind of flow with whatever your podcast
Sometimes
is.
you have to sign off, like, what you're using it for, stuff like that. But that's the way to go.
And then in Audacity, the way we do it, now if you have that 6-channel thing, you can plug your music in live and you can listen to it while you're doing it. But what we do is we don't listen to the music before. We don't hear what you hear. I go and post, and I do that. So I move the audio files over a little bit. I import the theme
Multiple
song.
channels, you layer them.
Yeah. And then I export the whole thing as an MP3, and then it does that. So, so that's basically the process.
Right.
The content, obviously, is up to you. We assume that if you want to do a podcast, you know what you want to talk about.
I would say this, more than anything else, I don't think it's knowledge based as much as passion based.
Yeah.
What are you passionate about?
I went to this podcasting convention thing once, and the guy said to not only not be afraid of something that's niche, you should pursue niche. Now we go the other way. We're not a niche at all. We talk about everything.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a poor decision for us. But this guy was talking about how if you have a niche audience like that really is into the thing and you're one of only 2 or 3 podcasts that talk about that thing,
right?
That is a huge leg up.
Like LED lighting.
Sure.
If you had an LED lighting podcast,
I can't imagine.
It's niche.
I know, you're probably right. So he said there's this guy, you know what dressage is?
No, I have no
dressage is a specific kind of horse riding. It's like the fancy horse riding where the horses like kick their legs up and they trot around and all that kind of stuff. There's this guy, he said he has a dressage podcast.
Yeah.
And he makes like $50,000 a year off of this thing.
Yeah.
Like because people who are into that,
it's a niche thing.
They all know about it.
Right.
You know. And so
well, you might ask a question, how do you make money on a podcast?
Right. So if you want to first of all, content wise, like let's say, well, I want to do sports. If the thought is that you want to get the most listens, the quickest, I guess, you know, if you take this guy's advice, and he owns a podcasting company, I think he knows more about it than we do.
You do curling.
You don't say this is a sports podcast. You don't say this is a basketball podcast.
Yeah.
You say this is a Kansas State basketball podcast. Like,
yes.
you know, whatever you're into. Let's say
Kansas State recruiting.
Yeah, okay, we're getting really niche. I don't know. You could talk about that every week. But let's say you live where's Kansas State?
In Kansas.
Oh, shoot. I'm normally pretty good with these college towns.
Wichita.
No. Anyway, let's say you live in Wichita. And you say, you know what, I'm going to do a Wichita State baseball podcast because I know about the Wichita State baseball team, and that's what I'm going to do. And that's a pretty popular baseball team as far as college goes. That you want to do something like that rather than this is a baseball podcast.
Right.
There's a lot of baseball podcasts, and you're going up against the ESPN baseball podcast and the Ringer baseball podcast, and CBS and AB. You know, I mean, it is
experts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, you know, and big names that can get big guests. This week we got Barry Larkin. This week we got Chris Sabo. This week we got Paul O'Neill. You know, this
one week
we
we're going to have Brandon Levings.
Yeah, we will have the one and only former. I think he played a little college baseball player. Best baseball player I know. Oh, that's not true. I know actually somebody that's better than him, but he's great and he's a friend, personal friend. So so they say you want to be niche. They say don't be. You know,
don't be us.
Don't be us. Don't do the thing that we're doing because
what are we doing?
Sometimes I wonder. So that's, and then as far as then getting money for your podcast,
yes.
You say, well, what do I need to do? I believe the number, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe the number that this guy said was 1,000. Was it 1,000? I thought it was 500.
I think it's 1,000 in 3 weeks.
I thought it was 500
per episode.
So he said 3 weeks from your release, and I guess we'll go with a higher number because it's safer. If you have 1,000 listens per episode, 3 weeks from release. So this episode that we're releasing today, 3 weeks from now, by then it has 1,000. Not 3 years from now, but 3 weeks from now it has 1,000. Yeah. So if you're averaging that within a 3 week span, then advertisers you're something that they actually want to use. That means you're getting out to enough people.
And that's a baseline. You're not making
and you always want to encourage your listeners to comment, rate, and subscribe because that's how you get pushed up on the algorithms. So if all of your listeners are commenting and rating and subscribing to your podcast, then that's going to make your podcast
don't be
look
obnoxious
better.
with it.
No, don't be obnoxious. But, you know, say, hey, you know, it wouldn't be a bad idea every show just to do a little, hey, if you want to help the show, you know, comment, rate, subscribe. We'd appreciate it. It would mean a lot to us. So
and then drop it.
What's that?
And then drop it.
And then drop it.
Yeah.
Don't keep on talking about it. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know.
That's
Jason,
right?
Can you think of anything else?
I mean, we came up with a really snazzy logo.
I think a logo is important. I think if you think about it from the standpoint of normally these logos are shrunk down quite a bit.
Yes.
You're not looking at these really big, right? And so you want something that grabs your attention. You don't need a lot of detail on your logo.
No.
Really, the less detail, the better. It's gonna be most likely seen as a small icon.
Yes.
And so you want it to be something that kind of grabs
Stands
your
out.
attention.
Yeah.
So we did black with white and our stupid looking faces, and it says Lower Road Radio. So as you probably know if you're listening to this.
Which is really confusing because it's not radio.
It's not radio.
And nobody knows what Lauer Road is.
No, I mean we're
We're
telling
an
you how to
anomaly.
do it,
Yeah, what not to do.
but we don't take our
Don't do what we did.
yeah. But it's what we do. Here's my other advice, and then we can be done with this. We can be out with this. This
The
is
truncated
This is
episode.
truncated.
Yeah.
It's going to be less than half an hour. My advice is do something that you genuinely love
Yes.
and that you genuinely enjoy.
Yes.
And so, because that's going to come through, you might be able to fake your Wichita State baseball podcast for a month. But if you're talking about, I'm going to do this for 6 years,
Yeah.
10 years, 20 years, even 6 months, you're going to lose it.
Yeah.
People will pick up on the fact that the only reason you're doing this is because, I don't know, because you want to hear your voice or you think people will pay you money for it or something like that. If it's not something that you're excited about, I cannot imagine people actually wanting to listen to it and then you wanting to do it long term.
Yeah, you're going to burn out.
You'll burn out.
Yeah.
So find something that you're excited about, passionate about, and make it about that. If it's niche, all the better.
Yeah.
All right.
I think there's one more thing, and
Yeah.
we haven't done a whole lot of this, but I'd be curious to do this, is cross-pollination
with other podcasts.
with other podcasts.
They say that's a really good thing to do.
Yeah, we have not done it.
Everybody says it's a really good thing to
Yeah.
do. So
We've been told
you
so
know,
many times you should do that.
Yeah. Well, if anybody wants to have us on their podcast, I can't make any promises, but yeah, we should go on other people's podcasts and have them on ours, and scratch each other's backs.
Yeah.
Because it's not like one person can't be subscribed to both podcasts. We're not competing against the other
Yeah,
podcasts.
you're only
per se.
allowed to have 10 podcasts.
That's it. If that were the
subscriptions.
case, do you think
Yeah.
we'd have more or less?
More, I think.
I think we'd have more too.
Yeah.
Be an interesting social experiment. Well, that's it. Do you have anything else?
Nope.
All right. Hopefully this has been a help. Feel free to write us on Facebook or Podbean, comment, whatever, we'll see
Comment,
it.
rate, subscribe, like,
All that stuff.
stars.
And
hearts.
feel free to get in contact with us. Facebook's probably the best way.
Yeah.
And, if you have any more questions, we'd be happy to address them. All right. This is Dan signing off for Jason, reminding you to keep your stick on the ice and to never wear the blue sweats.